In this two-part video, we'll review 5 methods of fabric manipulation that can enhance your design creativity. In this video, we'll review how to create plissé, lettuce hem, and shearing and smocking techniques. There are 2 ways to add plissé effects to a garment. One is for large plissé folds, and the other is for smaller plissé folds. Let's add a larger plissé effect to the back of this garment. To do so, we need internal lines for the folds of the plissé. We can add them using the pen tool, or we could have added them to the patterns in the 2D CAD system before importing them into VStitcher. Next, we lock all pieces in the 2D window and marquee select all the internal lines on the back pattern. To create creases along the internal lines, we go to the line properties in the context view and enable the iron property. Here, we can set the angle we want between 1 and 180 degrees. The angle determines the intensity of the crease. The larger the angle, the greater the crease. Let's use 90 degrees. We click Dress and allow the garment to simulate. We may need to use pinch and adjust the drape of the garment slightly to ensure the creases fall nicely. We can also lower the grid to have more crisp creases. We can lower this to about 0.6 and allow the garment to dress a while longer. And it's complete. The next method is more suitable for smaller and irregular plissé effects. We want to add this effect to the pants. For this method, instead of using internal lines and creating iron lines, we use a displacement map. Note, you may require help from a 2D, 3D artist to edit and create the map. The fabric used for this pair of pants already has a crinkly texture according to the normal map. We want to add a displacement map to create the plissé effect. To do so, we select the normal map and then select Edit Externally to open the image in Photoshop. Next, we need a striped image like this in different shades of gray. We can create this in Photoshop or other photo editing software. Back to the normal map, we go to Image, Adjustments, Desaturate. Next, we copy the striped image into this file as a separate layer. We want to blend the stripe image with the background, so we adjust the blending type and find a suitable one. Color burn looks good. We can still see details of the crinkles. This is our new displacement map. For displacement maps, remember that white areas pop out of the surface, while darker areas recede into the surface and mid-gray areas have no effect. It looks a little too dark, so we'll adjust the brightness using the curves adjustment slightly. Looks great! We save this as a PNG or JPEG file. In VStitcher, we click on the displacement channel of the fabric and select the displacement map we created. Since this is a displacement map, we will not see the effect in the 3D window. We can only see it once we do a ray trace render. To preview the effect, we use the V-Ray Ray Trace Rendering preview. We want the effect to be much smaller, so we need to make the displacement map smaller. We click on the displacement map channel and type 10 centimeters in the height. The value changes back to the original. This is because the image is linked to the diffuse map, so it is the same size as the diffuse. We select Independent instead. Now we can scale the map to be smaller. We can increase, decrease the depth to adjust the visibility of the creases. Let's check once again in the Preview Render window. This looks great. If we have a fabric that is not crinkly, we can add the striped gray image as the displacement map without blending it with the normal map. Blending it with the normal map helps to reduce the harshness of the lines and gives more realism to the texture. And that is how we add plissé effect to a garment. We want to add a lettuce hem to the edge of these pants. To do so, we multi-select the hem of the pants. In the Edge Properties in the Context view, we enable Shrink. Instead of shrinking the edge, we will be expanding it. We are going to use a negative shrink value to do so. For example, -40%. We also want to add a slight depth value here. A value between 0.3 and 0.5 should do the trick. Next, we need to lower the grid size. For such fine detail, we may require to lower the grid size to something like 0.4 or 0.3. Let's dress the garment to view the results. If the simulation is slow, we can enable Fast Mode. Before finishing the simulation, let's turn off Fast Mode so the details simulate correctly. It looks like it could use a larger negative shrink value. We can play around with the values for shrink and see which gives the best results for the fabric we are using. Let's try negative 100% and click Dress to view the changes. This looks okay, but the edges of the hem still look pointy. This may mean that the grid size is still too large. Let's reduce it to 0.2. Much better. We need a little bit more structure on the edge, so we apply Force Multiplier. Adding a value between 3 and 5 should give us good results. This looks great. We want to add an overlock on the edge to finish the hem. And that is how we create a lettuce hem detail. Shearing and smocking effects can be added to a garment in a few ways. Let's create a shearing effect on the front and back of this blouse. We need to add internal lines to shrink. We multi-select both the front and back bodice edge and select Clone by Offset in the context view. We create an offset of 1 cm and 15 copies. Next, we marquee select all the internal lines and enable the shrink property in the context view. Now we add a shrink value of 40%. We click Dress to see the results. The edge of the pattern needs to be dressed too. The shearing effect does not look too good. Let's add a force multiplier with depth to improve the gathers. For shearing effect, we can use a force multiplier of about 1.2 to 1.5 and input the height of the shearing into the depth field. To see the shearing details, we need to lower the grid size of the pattern piece. Let's try between 0.3 and 0.4. We allow the garment to dress for a little bit to allow the details to simulate correctly. We can lower the grid size even more to see more details. Let's try 0.2. This looks so much better. If we want to add an embroidery detail above the shearing, we can add a transparent layer above the shearing detail. We want to create a rectangle that is the same size as the original pattern after it has been shrunk. Add a rectangle that is 16 by 15.84 centimeters. We create edge symmetry and create a copy for the back pattern. Now we do a Clone by Offset to create the internal lines within the pattern. We can now apply the embroidery stitch on the internal lines. As for the fabric, we clone the original fabric and assign the new fabric to these two pieces. Then we adjust the transparency to 100%. Stitch the edges of the patterns to the shirt's pocket. Stitch the side seam as well. In the styling pane, we lock the front and back pattern to prevent movement when we simulate the new pattern pieces. And next we add the new pattern pieces into the Arrange mode. Change the 3D layer to be higher than the sheared pattern and dress the garment. And that's it! The next method is best suited for more complicated shearing and smocking details. For this, we need to use normal and displacement maps, as well as the embroidery detail. This is for more visual purposes, and thus we will be adding the effect on the pattern piece that is flat. This is best acquired via scanning the original maps or creating them externally in photo editing software. For example, here we have the embroidery image, the normal map, and displacement map. In VStitcher, we clone the fabric applied to the blouse. Then in the cloned fabric, we replace the normal map and the new displacement map. We apply this fabric to the front and back small patterns. Next, we bring the embroidery image in as a fabric and we group it with the new fabric. To adjust the stitch position, we use the Texture tool and change the color to whatever we need. This looks good. Since we used the displacement map, we can use the V-Ray Ray Trace Render Preview to view the results. The last method is for curved pattern pieces. For this, we add an image of the smocking detail onto the pattern as an edge assignable trim. Similarly, this is only for visual purposes, so we would only need the final pattern piece after smocking or shearing. We need to edit the size of the artwork to match the height of the pattern and ensure that the image is seamless in the image editor. We can also edit the image size and crop it before importing into VStitcher. If available, we add the normal and displacement maps to the garment. If not available, we can use the Auto-Generate Depth Maps option. We can experiment with the normal and displacement maps depth to see which values are most suitable for the results we want to achieve. Let's review the results in the V-Ray Ray Trace Render Preview. And these are the methods we can use to add shearing and smocking details to a garment. You can review more fabric manipulation methods in the second part of this video.